Hello and welcome to the EdjSports NFL Podcast for Week 6. I'm your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst here at EdjSports. Just want to remind you that we are available on the EdjSports Podcast Network as well as our EdjSports YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our show on any podcast platform, that's any platform of your preference. And if you enjoy the show, please give us a 5-star review. Now, I want to take a moment here to welcome Scott Brown on the show. He's with me every week. We took a break last week, but we are both back here, and Scott is our VP of Data Science here at EdjSports. Scott, how was your weekend of football? Week 6, where, like you said before the show, about a third of the way through this extended season.
Yeah, it was all right. I mean, from my perspective, another Bears-Packers game gone by, and another time getting owned by Aaron Rodgers. You know, the truth hurts. But apart from that, a lot of other interesting and fun games went down this weekend, and I'm looking forward to talking about them with you this week.
Yep, and speaking of Aaron Rodgers and knowing him all his – there's a word we're not going to say, but all his life he says he's owned the Bears, and like you said, it's kind of hard to argue with the truth. There's only been a handful of times that he did not own the Bears. So, yeah, we'll jump right into Week 6 action, starting with the last game that's been played so far this weekend, the Sunday Night Football game between the Seahawks and the Steelers. So this one was a pretty slow start. I think there wasn't a score until late first quarter, early second. The Steelers got on the board, ended up going up to a 14-0 lead. The second half was a completely different story. I mean, we looked at adjustments on both sides of the ball for Seattle. Just pounded the rock the second half opening that drive, running the ball. Alex Collins seemed like he touched the ball. It seemed like he had about 150 carries on that one drive alone. And came back and made this game, ended up getting to overtime. But a costly Mike Tomlin error helped the Seahawks get there. So looking at a minute 35 left in the fourth, it was 4th and 3 on the Seattle 34. They were tied at 17, and Mike Tomlin chose to kick the field goal to put them ahead by 3. And this is something, Scott, you know, we've talked about and we will talk about is leaving. You take the lead, but it's a temporary lead, and you give that other team a minute and 35 is an eternity in the NFL. Even if you got no timeouts, that's a lot of time. This would cost the Steelers 8.7% in win probability prior to the snap. That is even accounting for Geno Smith at quarterback, not Russell Wilson. So you can only imagine what it would have been had Wilson been in the lineup there.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to point that out. I think, it's interesting to see the model doesn't like this decision even when Geno Smith is playing quarterback for the Seahawks. You can only imagine how bad it would really be if Russ was in there because, you know, that guy's a stud, obviously, in these spots. But yeah, I'm sure you'd have some folks disagreeing with us here, but you have to remember, you know, these teams are really good at leading end-of-game drives, and just because you kick a field goal here to take the lead, by no means is the game over. You leave plenty of time for your opponent to come right back on you, and you know, it's pretty likely they'll tie the game, and you know, in some cases they may even take it from you, rip your heart out with a touchdown. So yeah, we don't like this kind of safe play call here to take the field goal, and we think going forward is better.
And that doesn't even this next one it doesn't even show up in our top fives, I don't think, but just something I want to mention because I think it's something we've come to know from Pete Carroll. They had a 4th and 5 from the Pittsburgh 38-yard line earlier in the game. Chose to punt, not even kick a field goal. I mean, that's a 55, 56-yarder, which isn't unmakeable for Jason Myers there, and chose to punt there. That was 2.5% earlier in the game. I think that's, I don't know if I could say it's a worse decision than Tomlin's, but had that been later in the game, would have been interesting to see what that was, because that was just a bad one. Like I said, we've come to see that from Pete Carroll, it seems like, every single season. He just refuses to go for it on 4th downs. But the Tomlin decision, like we said, allowed the Seahawks just enough time to have another possession. They hit the game-tying field goal as time expired to set up overtime. Now, in overtime, Mike Tomlin had another costly error. 4:33 left. It was 4th and 1 on the Pittsburgh 29, their own 29-yard line. This is something we've seen a lot, too. We've talked about over the first few weeks of the season, more so in regulation, but overtime it becomes even more important possession because this was Pittsburgh kicked off to begin overtime, so this was their first possession. They could win it. But kicking the ball away, Seattle just needs a field goal now to win the game. He chose to punt. This cost them 9.7%. So between those two decisions, we're looking at almost 18.5% win probability given up there. This was our second worst call of the week. Again, on your own 29, but Steelers, they were handing off to Najee Harris. It didn't seem like he had too many negative plays in that game last night.
Yeah, and it's just too conservative, right? I mean, 4th and 1 in the modern NFL, and you have an offense, any sort of competent offense should be able to pick up the first down more often than not. And yeah, the stakes are really high here, being that it's overtime and you enter sudden death as soon as you surrender the ball back to the Seahawks. All they need is a field goal to beat you. So yeah, this just seems like another clear one where, new school believes that this is the right call to go for it. Old school, kind of stuck in their ways, wants to play it safe and just punt the ball away to trust their defense to make a play. And in this case, the defense did.
Yep. The defense came through, and the contradiction on that too, which is a valid argument. Our model, we still stand by it, but you don't get that. Seattle's already in field goal range. You mentioned they only need a field goal to win, but you punt the ball away, you still give them that opportunity. They need more yards to do it, but you don't have the ball, so you don't really have a say. But like you said, defense bailed them out on the very next play. TJ Watt, I think there was actually a delay of game, or there was a penalty before that, like 1st and 15. It might have been 1st and 10. I don't exactly remember that one, but TJ Watt gets the strip sack on Geno Smith. Steelers recover, I think it was a Seattle 16. They ran one play where I think Big Ben just kind of dove to the right to get the ball in the center of the hash marks, and then knelt down on the next one, try and run down a little bit of time. But that turnover cost the Seahawks 49% in win probability. That was the largest of the week, the most impactful play, positive or negative. The absolute difference there, 49% was the biggest this week. Ended up setting up the game-winning field goal by Boswell, and the Steelers went on to win what started, as we said, a boring game into an exciting game, and the Steelers came away with the win. A huge win. Both teams needed a win. Seattle falls 4 games behind the Cardinals for first in the West, and Pittsburgh is now, I think, only 2 games behind Baltimore in the AFC North.
Yeah, that play to set up the field goal was an absolute dagger in the heart for obvious reasons. Don't really need to go into that too much. Just want to say poor Geno Smith. Back-to-back weeks, plays well enough to give the Seahawks a chance at the end of the game. And unfortunately, when the ball's in his hands on those late game drives, 2 turnovers in both of those games. Last week with an interception on the first play of the drive, and then this week, I think either the first or second play of the drive gets, holds onto the ball, gets sacked, and coughs it up in chip shot field goal range for the Steelers. So a rough couple of weeks for Geno Smith. Hopefully he can bounce back. But yeah, this one definitely turned into an interesting one despite its slow start.
Yeah, and if you're a Seahawk fan, I mean, you got to kind of like your outlook over these next couple of weeks before Russell Wilson. They've got the Saints at home, then the Jaguars at home. 2 very winnable games. Saints are a little bit of a tougher opponent, but we've seen them. We don't really know what to expect from them.
Yeah.
But as he gets a little bit more comfortable in there with the ones getting those reps, and you said did well enough to keep them in the game. So the next couple of weeks they could have a couple big wins heading into a couple tough ones right after that, at Green Bay and then the Cardinals after their bye in the early November. But Russell Wilson should be back at that point. Moving on to another exciting game. We had another overtime game, Patriots-Cowboys. We had some good first half calls from Mike McCarthy, which we've seen he's been, he gets a lot of criticism, but we mentioned it, I think, a couple weeks ago that he's actually been very good on 4th downs. Fans and writers and things have disagreed and said that he doesn't, isn't really making the best decisions, but he is. And the first, we'll get to that opening drive. First, we want to talk about the first quarter coming down to the end. I think it was their 3rd drive. About 2.5 minutes left, 4th and 1 on their own 47. Pretty much a no-brainer. McCarthy goes for it. Made the right decision by our model. Added 4.5% in win probability prior to the snap. Zeke ended up getting to the 50, picking up 3 yards in the first down. Was the 5th best call of the week. So now coming to the 4th best, we had the second quarter coming down right before halftime, and I'm sure everyone, Cowboys fans especially, because of what happened on the 3rd down play before this. But 4th and goal at the 1. Goes for it, added 4.8% in win probability before the snap. Dak Prescott pulled the old Drew Brees, jumped over, looked like he was in, but replay saw it otherwise, and I think they got that call correct.
Yeah, I mean, I guess breaking things down for a second, how interesting, I guess, is it that time and time again, Mike McCarthy is the one getting put in these situations, and he's not passed some of these tests, but I would say, by and large, he's making the right call in these situations. I think to reverse the framing a little bit, anytime you get a 4th and 1, I think in general you should be anchoring towards going for it. Mm-hmm. And it looks like Mike McCarthy, is thinking along similar lines. That Cowboys offense is really good, and trust them, right? Trust the offense, keep them on the field.
You pay Zeke Elliott all that money for a reason.
Yeah, you got Dak and all those great wide receivers. That strong offensive line. It's it's certainly the strength of that team. And I think both of these situations, even though they're early on in the game, they're the right call to be going for it in general on 4th and 1. And I think it's an interesting juxtaposition as compared, Mike McCarthy versus other head coaches. Because I imagine if you had a Pete Carroll or Mike Zimmer facing these similar situations as much as McCarthy has, you're going to see punts. Yep. You're going to see field goals on 4th and goal from the 1. And he's definitely proven time and time again he's no stranger to making the rightfully aggressive play call.
And we'll see that later in the season coming up, I think, in just a few weeks when we come out with our initial coach rankings. We'll see how those coaches stack up against each other. Would not be surprised to see McCarthy up there with the best of them. We've mentioned Stefanski is up there and Brandon Staley with the Chargers. But one that we don't have in our top 5, but want to mention, like I said, that opening drive. They get 9 yards on the first 3 downs, 4th and 1 at their own 34. Choose to go for it, and he took a lot of crap for that, basically all over social media, even on the broadcast. They didn't really agree with it. Went for it, didn't get it. More often than not, I think, especially with that offense, probably 70%. I would probably be willing to bet more than 70% of the time they pick up that 1 yard. Didn't do it, but that I think it looks like it was a 2.9% increase in pre-snap win probability. So again, by our model, was the correct choice. And in years past they haven't had a good defense, and people have said don't put your defense, it's early in a bad position. New England went down and scored after that, but that Dallas defense has been really good this year, a lot better than what people expected. I think by DVOA they're even top 10. So he trusting his offense and his defense. You can do both at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other, which is something we've talked about a handful of times on here. But coming now, so he made all the right calls in the first half.
Right.
When it mattered most, though, he kind of puckered up and he messed up pretty bad. Fourth quarter, 2:47 left, 4th and 2 on the New England 33. It looked like this was originally a 4th and 1, which would have made this even worse. But 4th and 2 is what the official stats are. Chose to kick the field goal. They were down 21-20, down just 1 point, like we saw with the Steelers. And Seahawks chose to kick the field goal to try and take that temporary lead. A lot more time left in this, though. 2:47. They do still have all their timeouts. But this was a 12.8% loss in win probability. The worst play call of the week. You want to talk about this one a little bit? I know these are your favorite, I think.
Yeah, it comes back to, once again, there's a whole bunch of value to be had on these score differentials where ties are very unlikely, even though a tie wound up happening in this game, where holding out for last possession is so valuable. And so what's going on here is exactly that. The model's picking up on kicking a pretty longish field goal here to take just a 2-point lead when your opponent just gets the ball back and gets to come back on you with only needing a field goal is not as great of a position as it really seems at first blush. And the better thing here would be, or the ideal thing here would be to pick up that first down, hold on to the ball, run a few more plays, drain the clock out. The Patriots in this case only have one more timeout, so you can easily burn through that and likely get hit the 2-minute warning. And then potentially if you pick up another first down, bleed the clock all the way out until you have a nice easy field goal to win the game. That is the ideal, right? I know listeners or critics might say that's kind of pie in the sky, right? That's really ideal. But it's really not that not that far-fetched, right? We're just talking about a high-level NFL offense gaining 10 yards, or picking up the first down for 2 yards and then maybe picking up 10 additional yards after that, and the game's over, right?
And we're taking into account the fact that they might not get. I know we say just get the first down, like you said. That's kind of like the most optimistic outlook, but these numbers also do account for the fact that sometimes they don't get it.
That's exactly right. And they're outs, right? They're outs. So the Cowboys have 3 timeouts. So you go for it here. You don't pick it up. Say Patriots take over. Well, I mean, we've seen teams do this time and time again. Offenses do this time and time again in these situations. They just kind of run the ball in the middle of the line of scrimmage 3 times in a row and then punt, right?
Yep.
And you can stop the clock 3 times with your timeouts. So there are outs here, even if the Cowboys go and don't pick it up. So, I'm sure this one raises some eyebrows from folks who disagree, but we still are going to stick by this one. We think this is the right call. Being aggressive here is the right move, even though it's unconventional. And, we don't like McCarthy's decision here.
Yeah, and there actually were, surprisingly on this one, quite a few people that agreed that disagreed with McCarthy's decision that would agree with us that wanted him because of all the factors we talked about, the timeouts, they've still got the defense. Well, it turns out he was bailed out by Trayvon Diggs. Got a pick 6 on Mac Jones on the next play because the Cowboys missed that field goal.
What a crazy sequence of events after this decision. I mean, it was just crazy. Let's dive into it. Yeah, it got kicked off by Trayvon Diggs, pick 6 on I think the second play of the ensuing drive, and then poor Mac Jones. But then redemption comes in on the following drive. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the Trayvon Diggs, and he's had an awesome start to the season. That guy has just been unbelievable. He's a defensive player and has more touchdowns than his brother Stephon, who's a receiver, although I don't expect that to last. But great start to the season for him. But that pick 6 cost 47.3% in win probability for the Patriots. Obviously, it added that for the Cowboys. Was the second most impactful play of the weekend. The Patriots would respond on the ensuing possession. The very next play after the kickoff, obviously, was a 75-yard touchdown, which seemed to be some type of broken coverage, miscommunication, something on the Dallas side. That was a 24.6% win probability. Finished just outside our top 5. I think it was number 6 on our most impactful plays. So then, the Patriots go for 2 and are up by 3 at that point. Cowboys go down, kick a field goal to tie it, and then in overtime, the Patriots never saw the ball. Dak and the offense went down the field, converted a couple big spots there, and got CeeDee Lamb for the win. I think a 35-yard touchdown on that one, which he was pretty much wide open on that. Dak after the game hurt his calf on that one, but seems like he says he'll be all right. But just an awesome game all around. Like from start to finish, it was just a phenomenal game.
Yeah, it was just chaos in that, the final few minutes of the fourth all the way into overtime. What more could you ask for of a game there? I mean, the excitement down the stretch was just unparalleled.
And one other game, the other overtime game, don't have a lot to say, just a couple notes want to put out. The Panthers had that comeback. They did not end up winning the game, but were down 28-17 with 6-something minutes left. I think they had just fumbled. The Vikings took over, I think, at the Carolina 38-36, somewhere around there. Panthers were down to just 1.1% chance to win. At that point, they were able to force a fourth down for the Vikings. Greg Joseph missed the field goal. The Panthers went down, ended up kicking a field goal, which I think we had as an error, but they were so low at that point. But it was 28-20. They cut it. They're able to get the ball back. They forced the Vikings to punt and have 1st and 10 at their own 4, pinned back deep, get to 4th and 10. They get no yards at 1.7% and are able to convert a couple fourth downs there, drive down the field, and force that game to overtime. So just a great effort there by the Panthers. Looked pretty much left for dead there with 6 minutes left, down 11. You looked like the Vikings were going to go up 14 on a field goal. And the Vikings ended up pulling it out. They've had a ton of nail-biters this season. Seems like every game they play comes down to the wire, comes down to a last second. They've been able to pull some out. They have not been able to pull out some others, but they're living and dying by those close games.
Yeah, and it looks like I didn't admittedly catch as much of this game, but it looks like it came down to another missed field goal at the end, unfortunately for Joseph. But yeah, you mentioned it. These Vikings find themselves in close games, it seems like, every week. Whether or not they're out to an early lead, they're often coughing it up, or in some cases they're coming back to make it close. So hard to know what to really make of that team yet. On paper, on offense, they seem pretty stacked.
The defense is much better, healthier this year than they were last year.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where things go from here. And you never know with Mike Zimmer, or I guess you do kind of know, unfortunately for Vikings fans. And we'll be talking about that, I guess, a little bit later on in the show.
So now we're going to move on to our top 5. So we're going to start with our top 5 most impactful plays. I'm combining some words there. But now that we've got those storylines out of the way, we'll talk about the top 5 most impactful plays. Now these, again, just to remind you or to let you know if you're new, first time listening to the show, the plays that had the most impact on the game in terms of win probability, either positive or negative, but it's always going to be from the offense's perspective since they have the ball to start the play. So starting with number 5, we had that game in London, early morning. Jaguars-Dolphins, fourth quarter, only 5 seconds left. They're tied 4th and 8 on the Miami 44. The Jaguars go for it. They get a 9-yard gain to Laviska Shenault, get a first down and get a timeout, and are able to kick the game-winning field goal on the next play. That 4th down conversion added 25% in win probability. And we'll talk about this decision, or do you want to just go ahead and we'll talk about the decision on this since it's not in our top 5. There's kind of some explanation around that play there based on the timing and what was going on there. So I'll let Scott, I know we talked about this before the show. I'll kind of let you talk through this before we move on to our number 4.
Yeah. I want to caveat this play a little bit and just admit that there's a lot of uncertainty into estimating these things, right? I think from a listener's perspective, seeing this play wind up as number 5 may be somewhat surprising. You might maybe expect it to be higher, right? If you watch the game, it was a very exciting thing to witness, right? That they were able to basically hit everything they needed in 5 seconds. Considering the circumstances, 4th and 8, so it was just very, very hard to do what they did. Stop the clock with 1 second, make the field goal, and like kind of snatch victory from the jaws of defeat there. But yeah, from the models, to go into a little bit of detail about what the model's doing, it thinks that when you call a play here with 5 seconds, that a whole bunch of the time, the game's or regulation's going to end without you picking up the first down or without you, even being able to kick a field goal. So in this situation, the model generally thinks that kicking the field goal first is the right thing to do. But once again, this kind of rests on some assumptions that are hard to know, right? So it's going to be a very long field goal. I think a 62-yarder if they would have attempted it right away. I know that they have a rookie kicker there. He was, I think, cut by maybe he wound up being cut by a different team. They picked him up. And so it's really hard to know what that kicker's range is, right? And I mean, we do the best we can over here at Edge to sort of model that, but whatever assumption you make about that kicker's likelihood of converting a 62-yard field goal really matters a lot here. And so if that probability is basically 0, then throwing the ball here is the right move. And
because we actually had this as I think a 3% error, whereas over the punt, which is what I thought they might do and just play for overtime, was I think a 12% good decision to go for versus a punt. So like you said, a couple different ways to look at it there, but just a couple numbers for you all as well.
Yeah, and I think if we believe that that most NFL kickers have somewhat of a 5-ish% chance or so of making a 62-yard field goal. And if that's closer to 0, passing becomes right, and then also the win probability gained by doing what they did also goes up. So that would make that climb the list here. So, it's good to see this play enter our top 5. I think you can make the argument it should possibly be even higher. I think that's a reasonable take. But it's, I think, helpful for maybe listeners to understand from the modeler's perspective what where things can fall short, how the sausage is made, just a little bit to understand these sorts of assessments, and also I guess when we critique play calls, what's going on and what the model is saying, how are the numbers produced to get at those answers.
Yep, and looking at the numbers you mentioned, maybe a 5% chance to make that kick. Looking at the numbers that I've got here, a 4th and 8, you'd be expected to convert, a team maybe 35% of the time. But the other thing to look at is if you don't convert, chances are time's going to run out and it's going to overtime anyway. So Take your chances on running a quick play where you believe you can get that 8 yards, get the timeout, and get a chance at a field goal. At worst, if it is incomplete and Miami, gets the ball back, they're going for a Hail Mary, which is way less than a 35% chance. So really there was no downside, still playing for overtime. Relatively little downside on that decision.
Yeah, and one more point is, we definitely put a lot of effort into modeling how much time runs off the clock on plays. when you have 5 seconds left and you have, some timeouts in this exact situation, it's really hard to know what that should look like.
Especially needing 8 yards as opposed to maybe only needing 2 or 3. We can do a very quick out.
Right, where you can just kind of, free roll a completion. If it's incomplete, no big deal. You come back and kick a field goal. This one's very unique in that way. So you're just dealing with very little data. So we have to rely on assumptions about how much time runs off. When we sim out a pass play here, some amount of the time they're going to be able to pick up the yards they need with time remaining and call timeout. We just don't think it's that likely. So what you saw, according to the model, was a very unlikely occurrence, and for that reason, that sort of provides some color on how we assess it the way we did and why it's maybe number 5 as opposed to number 3 this week or something like that.
Yep. And for all the trouble he's had lately, Urban Meyer, aggressive, paid off, and they won the game, and he and Trevor Lawrence got their first win together and each of their first wins in the NFL. So we'll move on now to the number 4 most impactful play. It was the Vikings and Panthers. Fourth quarter, just 6 seconds left. You mentioned this, 2nd and 10. Greg Joseph for the Vikings misses the field goal that sends the game to overtime. Would have been a lot higher had they been down 1 or 2, going for the win. Obviously, still had overtime in their back pocket, so it only cost them 36.7%, with 50% counting as a tie. So that kept a little bit there for him and kept that from being an even worse play there for the Vikings. Number 3, the Dolphins-Jaguars. Back to this game, fourth quarter, 149, 4th and 1 on the Miami 46. And Miami has the ball, so their own 46, under 2 minutes left. This is a decision we'll get to when we get to our best decisions here in a moment, but just looking at the outcome of the play. So for once, this time we're actually looking at what happened on the play and judging it there based on the decision. But Malcolm Brown came up short of the first down on this one, cost the Dolphins 38.3% in win probability. Again, they were still tied. They had overtime in their back pocket as well. But the third most impactful play of the week, and then number 2 and number 1 we covered in the intro, Patriots and Cowboys, was number 2. And it was the Mac Jones interception that Trayvon Diggs returned for the touchdown at 47.3%. And Geno Smith getting sacked by TJ Watt, fumbling, recovered by Pittsburgh, was 49% there. So we're going to move in now, like I just mentioned, to our top 5 best decisions. Again, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to all of our Edge Sports shows on the Edge Sports Podcast Network and our Edge Sports YouTube. And you can catch all these top 5s again if you want to go back and look on our website, EdjSports.com, or our Edge Sports app. So now that the top 5 impactful plays are out of the way, Scott, let's talk about our top 5 best decisions from the weekend's action. So these are typically 4th down calls where coaches chose to go for it instead of kick. Don't typically include a punt or a field goal over going for it because those are 99% of the time pretty obvious. We're not going to credit guys for that, but
unless you're Brandon Staley.
Yeah.
What was that, a couple weeks ago? He did some interesting things at the end of the game. But yeah, you're right. Most often this is going to be, hey, you should have gone for it instead of punting or kicking a field goal.
Yep. So coming in at number 5 was we covered a handful of these already. Number 5 was the Dallas 4th and 1 at their own 47. Pretty much a no-brainer there to go for it. Increase their win probability by 4.5% prior to the snap just by choosing to go for it versus punt. Second one was the Cowboys again, 4th and goal at the 1. Dak Prescott, little QB sneak there. That one increased their pre-snap win probability by 4.8%. Coming up to number 3, we've got Andy Reid. This was a big win probability increase for as early in the game as it was. So the Chiefs against Washington, the Chiefs had the ball to start, or I think Washington started. The Chiefs were on their first drive. It was very early, 11 minutes left in the first quarter. 4th and 1 on their own 47. The Chiefs go for it. Adds 5.2% in win probability. Like I said, that is pretty much the most you're going to get. We saw, I think, a 5 or a 6 a couple weeks ago with the Colts on a 4th and goal at the 1 on the opening drive. But that was, kind of the opposite of what we've seen from Andy Reid. It seems like sometimes he's more conservative in the early going, and then later on he really, puts his foot on the pedal and is aggressive. But a really good decision here early, and they ended up going down, I think, and scoring a touchdown on that drive.
Yeah, and I think that the numbers here are largely a function of the game state being 4th and 1 from midfield. Kansas City's at their own 47, so it just it sets up nicely for those reasons to go for it. And
good offense against a bad defense.
Good offense against a bad defense, absolutely. So I mean, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, especially, pretty much every time you face a 4th and 1, barring some extreme circumstances, it's going to be a go. And, just because it's early in the first quarter, there's a lot of game left to play. Like, those things kind of don't matter, because you're at a point where you just want to maximize your possessions. And, it's a big win for Washington if they get, are able, anytime they're able to stop Kansas City, it's a huge win for them. So, don't make it easy on your opponent by surrendering possession that easily. And so on 4th and 1, it's definitely the right call to go. Model thinks so, and good on Andy Reid for passing that test.
And coming in at number 2, going back to Urban Meyer. 4th quarter, 14 minutes left, so quite a bit of time left in the 4th quarter here. 4th and 1 at the Dolphins' 9-yard line. Meyer decides to go for it, so he's up 17-13, can kick the field goal, take a 7-point lead, assuming they make it. That's a very high probability field goal, about 27 yards, I think. So, I don't want to say guaranteed, but yeah, just very high probability of making it to take a 7-point lead. I feel like a lot of coaches do this. I'm actually kind of surprised to see Urban Meyer went for it here, because coach still looking for his first win, having a lot of trouble on and off the field, just wanting to get that win, put his team in the best position. Chose to go for it. They didn't get it, but gave them 6.5% greater chance to win prior to the snap there.
Yeah, I mean, I like the call here. You're in the goal line area. So, I mean, I know you're 9 yards away, so it's a bit far, but still, there's just a lot of value to every yard you can pick up here. I think we saw a similar situation in weeks past where, picking up the first down here is obviously what you're going for, but you could score a touchdown on the next play, right? You get the equity you realize from that. Any sort of first and goal situation from within the 5, hugely valuable. You're basically, in expectation, scoring points on a single offensive play. So it's even though it's not, you're not actually in the end zone yet. So I think this is the right call. There's a lot of game left here, like almost the full 4th quarter left to play. Jags have a lead, but they really can't rest on that, right? Like, the Jags are never going to find themselves in a game where they're the favorite. Yep. And so, you just have to pursue every edge you can. And I think this is the right call by Urban Meyer.
Yeah, and even if you don't get it, we've talked about this before, you've got your opponent backed up. Inside their own 10, you've got a chance for a safety, a turnover down there,
field position
inside the 10. An interception, you're pretty clear. Pick 6, anything can really happen when you put the offense in an uncomfortable situation. So, moving on to number 1, same game, different team. Dolphins Jaguars. Dolphins have the ball, 1:49 left in the game. They're tied. 4th and 1 on their own 46. So this is another one. Very surprised to see Flores here, not necessarily because of him. He's had some really good calls. He's had some bad calls. He's one of those guys that's kind of in the middle. Don't really think of him as a great 4th down coach or a horrible 4th down coach, but chooses to go for it. Very aggressive here. They don't get it, unfortunately, for them, but the decision to go for it gave them 21.6% greater chance to win. So, I mean, I think this is the biggest of the season we've seen so far. I think Harbaugh was the biggest prior to that. I don't remember one before or since then or before then that was larger. So just a great decision, giving his team, the Dolphins, the best chance to win at that point in the game.
Yeah, just a lot of things about the situation that point towards going for it. You have only 1 yard to pick up on 4th down. You're at your own 46. So there's really... you're really in that zone of the field where it sucks to punt. And, there's 1:50 left. So there's just not, it's very unlikely you're going to get the ball back after you give possession up. So, going forward here is definitely the right move. I agree. I'm kind of surprised, pleasantly, I would say, by Flores' decision. I like you, don't really think of him as, being the offensively savvy type to realize that this is, I think, the right thing to do.
Especially as a defensive guy.
More of a defensive-minded head coach, I would expect, I'm going to trust my defense. I'm going to fire them up and give them a chance to win it in the fashion that I would like to see. But I think, I do think that you're more likely to be successful keeping your offense on the field here. Tie game, and, even though the result didn't turn out, it was still the right move.
Yep, and that was, again, number 1 of the best 4th down decisions of Week 6 so far with 1 game left to play. That was a 21.6% increase. Now we're going to move on to the top 5 worst decisions of the week. Before that, just want to remind you all again to visit our site, EdjSports.com, and our app, EdjSports. That app is available for both iOS and Android, where you can get NFL news and pregame betting analysis for every single game of the season. So, Scott, we got those good decisions out of the way. We wrap up, as we always do, with some of our favorites, a look at the top 5 worst decisions of Week 6. So these are the decisions coaches made that had the highest negative impact on their win probability before the snap, at the point of decision of going or kicking. Starting with number 5, we got the Vikings and Panthers. Our friend Mike Zimmer, this one, isn't horrible. I think he's on here because we had a couple coaches make a couple really good decisions that would have pushed him out had they not. But still, Vikings were leading 12-10. 4th and 1 at their own 34. Dalvin Cook is back. They gave him a ton of work yesterday, so he looked healthy. Second quarter, 3:11, still a lot of game left. He chose to punt, only needing 1 yard. This cost them 3.6% chance to win. We've mentioned, Zimmer on the show earlier today, a couple weeks ago. He's had some good ones, but more often bad than good. Is there anything that you want to add on to this one?
Yeah, I'm going to say get out of here with that and cut in Mike Zimmer some slack. It's 4th and 1, man. Go for it. And I think, the argument is going to be, we're on our own 34, so we can punt and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, but also, to counter that, there's 3:11 left in this second quarter. As we get down to the end of this second quarter, we're pretty close already. Possession, right? Like winning the 2-for-1 in pro football, just like in basketball, hugely valuable to have that extra possession, one more than your opponent in the first half. And on a 4th and 1, you just got to go. Like you're converting that too often to justify surrendering possession, by not even attempting it. So, I'm not going to bail Mike Zimmer out on this one. I still think it was the wrong decision, even though maybe he would disagree and others might defend him for all of the traditional reasons. But I definitely like what the model is saying here. I think going forward is the right call.
And in this situation, Minnesota still has 3 timeouts, 3:11 left. We said you've got 3 timeouts plus a 2-minute warning. You don't get it. The Panthers are pretty close. Maybe they just play for a field goal at the end of the half. But you've got a chance to get the ball back pretty quickly because they don't have to go the full length of the field to get points and run all that time down.
That's a great point. Yeah, if you turn it over there on downs, the next possession is going to resolve itself much more quickly, and so you're much more likely to get the ball back. If you punt it, back them up, they can basically massage the clock, manage it, so they can pretty much make things are going well. They can kind of time it so that way they can more effectively leave you with no time left on any subsequent possession you might get. So that's an excellent point to bring up.
So moving on to number 4, we've got Dolphins Jaguars again with this game. This was 4th quarter, 6:48 left, 4th and 1 on their own 46 again. The Dolphins, Brian Flores chose to punt here. I guess he learned from his mistake and he went for it later on. But had he gone for it here, they might not have even been in the situation where they were tied. Here he took a delay of game. Tua was in the shotgun. They had some motion going on. Couple hard counts. He went up on the line, still couldn't get him to jump. It hardly ever works. Just more of a show than anything. But this one cost them 4% prior to the snap on that 4th and 1. Again, when we run these, we don't run it at the 4th and 6 after the delay of game because you made the conscious decision to take that. So we're counting you as a punt on 4th and 1.
Yeah, that's right. I hate these fake, try to draw them off sides, delay of game penalties. It's just silly. It's like icing the kicker. I feel like prioritizing the wrong things. It just seems silly to me. And I agree. When you see coaches kind of straddle the fence, right, where later on in the game, he's making the right call in sort of similar circumstances. But early, just a few minutes before that, he wasn't because, there's some value to keeping the game close or, we have the lead. We need to hold on to the lead and be conservative. It just doesn't, from a pure trying to maximize your chance at winning the game standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. And so, I think the coaches almost subconsciously realize it when you sort of make a decision at one time point in the game, and then you sort of reverse course and make the opposite decision just a few minutes later. It seems really silly. But anyway, just to highlight this one real quick, 4th and 1, midfield, in a 3-point game towards, nearing the end of the fourth quarter, about 6:48 left, it's the right thing to do to go here. A lot of value to scoring a touchdown and going up 2 possessions. Not a lot of value to giving the ball back to your opponent, where they can easily tie the game up with a field goal. I think another interesting thing here to mention is less value as well in field goal, going up 6, right? We talk about this sometimes where you sort of induce your opponent right into being more aggressive on their subsequent possession. And if they're gunning for a touchdown, then that can leave you in a tough spot. Little bit maybe early for thinking that, but yeah, for a lot of reasons that we mentioned, this is, I think, just the wrong call here, and you need to be going for it on most 4th and 1s, and this one's no different.
Yeah, and it'd be cool to see, just going back to the whole intentional delay game and the hard count trying to draw them off. It almost seems like it would make more sense to if you're going to do that, to play the hard count, act like you've given up, and then to take a snap, because so many coaches do that, especially certain coaches. We see Joe Judge do it a lot. A guy like that where the defense probably knows they're not going to do it, catch him off guard going for it, but we'll see if anyone tries to catch any of the defense actually off guard by going for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. It would be interesting to study how often this works, and I think you're right. You sort of if you're a team that lacks credibility in this area, then it's really kind of silly to do. I guess you're not really losing much by taking the penalty yards, but yeah, I mean, you are if your mindset is just to punt it anyway. So it's a bit of a different story when Aaron Rodgers trots out in the field and they try to do something like this. But yeah, it's not the right call though. We like going for it.
And the top 3, moving on from number 5 and number 4, the top 3 are ones that we've covered already somewhat, so we won't spend too much time here. Number 3 of the worst decisions was the Steelers-Seahawks, tied at 17, a minute 35 left in the 4th, and the Steelers, Mike Tomlin chose to kick that field goal to go up 3, take that temporary lead. That was an 8.7% error, as we mentioned. Number 2 was the 4th and 1 at their own 29 in overtime. That punt cost them 9.7%. And then the Mike McCarthy down 1, 4th and 2 at the 33 with a little bit less than 3 minutes left, choosing to take the field goal there, was 12.8%. So that'll do it for all the top 5s. We're going to transition into our Monday Night Football preview. But one last time, just want to remind you that all of our top 5s can be found on EdjSports.com and our EdjSports app, available for both iOS and Android. And don't forget to read our weekly Risky Business column. This week, Frank Frigo writes about going for 2, explaining the logic behind going for 2 when you first score down 14. So you score that touchdown, cut it to 8, go for 2 on that first touchdown. Based on the decision by the Eagles on Thursday Night Football and some of the commentary from Troy Aikman, the skepticism there, but something that's been debunked, quite a few years ago and quite a few times, that it makes more sense. So again, that's the Risky Business column on our website at EdjSports.com. Moving on to the Monday night preview battle, Bills and Titans. So last year, even 2 years ago, this would have been the premier matchup of the week. But this week, it's not looking too much like it as far as what these teams have looked like so far. The Bills just have been awesome so far. The defense is tops in the league. The offense is actually only 12th, I think, in DVOA, despite putting up, I think, 35-plus in 4 straight games now. But a lot of the defenses they've played haven't been very good. So with those opponent adjustments in there, still above average, but that defense has been unreal. They're looking to limit the damage from Derrick Henry, trying not to let Ryan Tannehill get back on track with Julio Jones back in the lineup. A.J. Brown was supposed to play. I saw he was on the injury report yesterday with an illness. I haven't seen anything from him today, but could have his full complement of receivers back as well. So the Bills are currently sitting at -7 in the market. Our edge fair value actually likes the Titans a little bit better here at -3. The Bills -3, Titans +3, but 4 points lower than the market. I think it's 6 in some places, depending on where you look. So 3 to 4 points. So Scott, what are your thoughts on this matchup heading in?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. The Bills have just been on fire. They're coming off a huge win against Kansas City, although Kansas City's had their struggles this year. But if you look at the other results this year so far for the Bills, just absolutely blown people out. Admittedly, against some bad competition, we think. But Interesting to see the model disagree here with the consensus market lines. -3 is where the model has this game at in favor of Buffalo. The market lines, like you said, closer to 6 or 7. There's maybe not as much distance between those numbers as one might think at first, but yeah, we definitely think that there's some edge to be had here by playing Tennessee. So we like them with taking the points here in this matchup. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. Shifting over to the totals, it looks like the consensus total right now is somewhere in the low. It's been in the low 50s right now. It looks like it's about 53.5. And we actually think there's quite a bit of edge in the under, which may seem surprising. The Bills have definitely been able to just light up the scoreboard so far this season, but as you mentioned, their defense is tops. Perhaps one of the best defenses we've seen in quite some time. So, a big part of seeing these high totals is oftentimes teams getting into shootouts, right? And that hasn't stopped the Bills so far, but it's much more likely to see those high total games hit when you have a back and forth offensive duel, and when the Bills defense is involved, that's just like a lot less likely to happen. Yep. So that matchup between the Bills front and the Titans running game with Derrick Henry, it will be very interesting to watch early on in this game. But from a pregame standpoint, we do think that there's some edge to be had here by playing the under. That's the side that we like when it comes to the totals. Shifting over a little bit now and looking at where the money is and where the bets are being placed, it looks like both are lining up heavily on Buffalo. So from a number of bets standpoint, it looks like 83% of the bets are backing Buffalo, while 92% of the money is backing Buffalo. So our model is definitely contrarian here in this particular matchup. We're sort of going against the grain with what the consensus lines say, as well as where the public is placing their bets and placing their money. So it'll definitely be an interesting one to see how it shakes out. We do like the underdog here, but we'll find out, I guess, later on tonight what actually happens.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed looking at this as pertains to the total of 53.5, I think you said, I was I do our matchup previews for every game, just kind of some brief previews looking at the two teams, the betting lines. The Bills have only had 2 games go over 53 points this year. They were both against teams with decent offenses. Washington, when they played week 3, they were a top 10 offense, I think, even through 4 weeks. Kansas City last week, number 1 offense, they went over. The other games, though, Houston, Miami, Pittsburgh. Miami and Houston, they shut out, but it was 40-35, so they put up a ton of points, but still didn't go over 53.
Yeah, those are unders, right?
Pittsburgh was 23-16. That's their only loss against a good defense. But this is one that I think I mentioned in the video. As much as, I tend to agree with our model most of the time, this is one, honestly, I would be willing to, or probably take Buffalo for the points and the over in this game.
I see.
I think Tennessee, they as good as the Buffalo defense is, they're too good to not. They've played at an extremely efficient level the last couple of years. That heading into last season, no one thought they could keep it up. The efficiency was through the roof. It's like they can't sustain that. They pretty much did. The defense has been terrible the last few years. They're terrible this year. So the Bills are going to put up points. But this is one of those few games that I think that I would tend to kind of lean more towards Buffalo.
Interesting.
To score, I think, to win by more than 6 or 7, whatever the line is, and to go over that 53.5. But I guess we'll see tonight.
Let's place our bets and see where things fall. I think that's reasonable, and we'll be finding out later on tonight. Should be a good game.
Can't wait for that one. Again, last game of Week 6 puts us just over a third of the way through the season. So I just want to thank you all again for listening, joining in with us every week, or if this is your first time, hopefully you'll join us again in the future. We're here every Monday, Scott and I are, and then on Thursdays, you can find me on the EdjSports Podcast Network or on our EdjSports YouTube doing our weekend preview, betting preview for the Thursday night football game, as well as a couple games from Sunday of interest. They're some of the biggest games in previewing those lines and totals. Again, please review the show. If you enjoy the show, give us 5 stars. If you have a comment, feel free to leave a comment with your review. We'll read it on the next show, any comments that we get. Don't forget our new site and app experience at EdjSports.com, and that app is available for a download on both iOS or Android. It's EdjSports and EdjSports.com. Thank you, Scott, for joining me as you do every week. Enjoy that Monday Night Football game. We'll check back and see how wrong I am next week about this game tonight.
Sounds